Okay, so today we're really going to get into this book, It Ends With Us.
All right.
It's by Colleen Hoover.
Okay.
And we have this review that we're going to deep dive into called Se Pegó el Texto.
Okay.
It's in Spanish, but we're going to read from the English translation of it, of course.
Right.
But yeah, the whole premise of this deep dive is to understand kind of what this book is about, what are some of the core themes, and why it's resonated with so many people without you actually having to read it.
Right.
So
cool.
Maybe let's start off with kind of what makes this book different from other romance novels.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really interesting things, and the review gets into this right away, is that it's so much more than just a typical romance novel.
Right.
You know, a lot of romance novels are just about, you know, kind of that sort of idealized version of love.
Because
This one really gets into these deeper issues of resilience and the really difficult choices that people have to make in these situations where there's abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And the main character that we follow in this book is Lily Bloom.
Okay.
And the review kind of details, you know, her coming of age story in that she grew up in this household where her father was abusive towards her mother.
Wow.
And so it seems like that was a really defining
of course.
part of her childhood that she's kind of trying to move past. And she does that, at least in part, by moving to Boston.
Okay.
And she opens this flower shop.
Cool.
Which I think is very symbolic.
Oh, yeah.
Of, you know, her wanting growth and beauty in her life after, you know, this difficult upbringing.
That's a really interesting point. And I think, you know, if we think about it in the bigger picture, the review kind of comes back to this flower shop later as a real symbol throughout the book.
Oh, cool.
You know, it's not just a place where she's selling flowers. It really represents this deep longing for a fresh start, you know, for beauty and new beginnings to be able to grow even in the face of this pain that she's carrying.
Right.
I wonder if the review even gets into the specifics of what kind of flowers she chooses.
Oh, that's interesting.
You know, because maybe she picks, you know, flowers that are particularly resilient.
Right.
You know, that thrive even in really challenging conditions.
Like that.
But yeah, I think that's a really key point.
Yeah, okay, so we've got Lily in Boston now, and she meets Ryle Kincaid.
Okay.
And Ryle is a neurosurgeon. He's successful. He's charming.
Right.
They have this, you know, connection right away.
Yeah.
But even early on, he's really upfront about not wanting a long-term relationship.
Okay.
Did that kind of stand out to you?
Yeah, it did. And it made me think, you know, how often do we, and maybe Lily's doing this in this story, how often do we kind of downplay those early hesitations, those red flags?
Those warning signs.
Yeah, you know, especially when we have such a strong attraction to someone.
Yeah, no, you're totally right. And
it is kind of a classic romance trope, right? That instant connection.
Of course, yeah.
But I think here it might be setting us up for some problems down the line.
Yeah, and you're totally right, because that charm that Ryle has, it doesn't last.
Okay.
And that's where things get really interesting in the story.
So what happens?
So Ryle's behavior starts to shift.
Okay.
And we see that kind of charming facade that he puts up start to crack. And there are moments where he's angry.
Yeah.
He even gets aggressive. And then eventually it escalates to physical violence. Which, of course, is really disturbing considering Lily's childhood.
Right.
You know?
It's like she's reliving her past.
Yeah, it's like she's fallen into this, you know, cycle that she was so determined to get away from.
That's really sad.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, too, is that the review points out that Ryle isn't just this one-dimensional villain.
Right.
Like, he's not just evil all the time. You know, he does feel remorse after these incidents.
Interesting.
And he promises that it won't happen again.
I see.
And that's really key, I think, in understanding the complexities of these types of relationships. Because it's not always, you know, constant aggression.
Right.
You know, a lot of times there's this cycle of abuse where there's this, you know, tension building, and then the incident happens, and then there's this honeymoon phase where there's apologies and promises, and it kind of traps the victim in this cycle of hope and disappointment.
Exactly.
So that brings us to the central conflict that Lily's dealing with.
Okay.
Which is that she loves Ryle.
Right.
But she's also realizing the danger of staying in this relationship. So she's kind of having this internal battle between her feelings and the reality of the situation.
Yeah, it's got to be so hard.
Oh, absolutely. And to make things even more complicated,
Okay.
Atlas Corrigan comes back into her life.
Who's that?
So Atlas is Lily's first love.
Oh, wow.
And when they were kids, he was kind of like her protector when she was going through stuff with her dad. And so his return really forces her to confront her past.
Yeah.
You know, he's not just a memory anymore. He's this real person in her life again.
I see.
And I think he represents, this...
Like a different path.
Yeah, like a different path for her.
Interesting.
And also, he kind of reminds her of a time when she felt safe and valued.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so with Atlas back in her life, and with Ryle's behavior kind of escalating, Lily has to make this huge decision.
Wow.
Does she stay in this relationship that's clearly destructive, or does she find the strength to leave?
It's a tough choice.
It's a really tough choice, and the review really emphasizes how important this choice is for her well-being.
Right.
It's not just about her heart. Yeah. It's about her safety.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and this goes back to one of the major themes that the review explores, which is this cycle of abuse.
Right.
It's not just about a single incident.
Yeah.
It's about this pattern of behavior that's really hard to break.
Yeah.
And I think what's really interesting is the book doesn't paint Ryle as this total villain.
Okay.
He's shown as this complex character with flaws.
Interesting.
And that actually makes Lily's decision even more difficult.
Oh, wow.
And it really highlights, I think, the struggles that people in these situations face.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's not so black and white.
Right, right.
It would be easier if he was just this evil person.
Exactly.
But he's not.
Right.
So it makes it harder to just walk away. So I'm curious what you thought about that aspect.
I mean, I think it's really powerful because it forces us to kind of confront this uncomfortable reality that abuse is often not so clear cut.
Exactly.
And it makes you think about those real life situations where it's not so easy to just say, oh, well, that person's bad and this person's good.
Totally.
It's much more complicated than that.
And I think that's one of the things that's really resonated with readers. Yeah. Because it's so real. It's not this fairy tale.
It's definitely not a typical romance novel.
Right. Exactly. But the review also talks about Lily's resilience and her journey of kind of reclaiming her self-worth.
Right.
And it's not just a story about suffering.
No, not at all.
She makes the choice to put her own safety and well-being first.
Wow.
And I think the title of the book, It Ends With Us, is so powerful.
It is.
Because it represents her decision to end this cycle of abuse.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, like she's not just doing this for herself.
Right.
She's doing it for her daughter, for the next generation.
Yeah.
And it's a really powerful statement.
Definitely. Yeah.
And beyond just the plot, the review also talks about some of the symbols that Hoover uses in the book.
Right.
Where he talked about the flower shop.
Yeah.
But there's also this element of Lily writing letters to Ellen DeGeneres.
Interesting.
And I was wondering, how did you interpret that?
Well, I think those letters are really interesting because they give us this really intimate look into Lily's thoughts and feelings. It's like we're getting to read her diary. Yeah. And so we're not just told how she's feeling, we're actually experiencing it through her words.
And that really makes her struggles feel more relatable.
Absolutely.
It's not just this abstract idea.
Right.
It's real. It's raw.
It's personal.
It's personal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it sounds like that's one of the reasons why this book has resonated with so many people.
Yeah, I mean, the review really talks about how the book's honesty and its emotional depth have really connected with readers. Yeah. A lot of romance novels kind of sugarcoat things. Right. This one really presents a much harsher reality. Right. But it does it in a way that's still really engaging. I think people are really drawn to that.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's even sparked some really important conversations about domestic violence.
Absolutely.
Which is, such an important issue.
It is, yeah.
But the review also mentions that there have been, some debates and conflicting opinions about the book.
What kind of debates?
Well, some of it centers around The portrayal of the abuse.
Okay.
And the complexity of Ryle's character. You know, some readers have expressed discomfort with how he's portrayed.
I can see that.
Yeah, they feel like it's kind of humanizing an abuser, and they're uncomfortable with that.
Right.
But then others really appreciate the nuance.
Yeah.
And they think it adds to the realism of the story.
Right, right.
So it's definitely a conversation starter.
It sounds like it.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the power of the book, that it can evoke such strong reactions.
It's clearly a book that makes you think.
Absolutely. So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, what would you say are the main takeaways from this review?
Well, I think the biggest thing is that this book really explores this complex relationship between love and abuse.
Right.
It shows how hard it can be to break free from these harmful patterns.
Yeah.
And it also emphasizes how important it is to prioritize your own well-being.
Yeah, it's not just a love story.
No.
It's a story about survival and about choosing yourself.
Yeah, even when it's really hard.
Yeah, even when it hurts.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, as we think about this book and the themes that it explores, I think it's important to also consider how our own ideas about love and relationships might be influencing how we see these situations.
That's a good point.
You know, we often romanticize love.
Yeah.
And we might not always be seeing things for how they really are.
Right.
So I think it's important to be aware of that.
Absolutely.
And to really think critically about these issues and to support those who are going through these experiences.
Definitely.
Because it's clearly not easy.
Not at all.
And it's something that we need to be talking about more.
I agree.
So it ends with us.